Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's topic is one that has come up a lot lately: how to perfect your USA accent really fast. Whether you're learning English as a second language or just want to nail that American sound for an acting gig, business meetings, or even social settings, we've got you covered. And trust me, it's totally possible to improve your accent in a short amount of time, as long as you're dedicated and have the right strategies in place.
Yeah, Sarah. Accents are tricky because they don't just involve learning new words or grammar. It's all about mastering the nuances like intonation, rhythm, and even pronunciation of vowels and consonants. It's a bit like music. You have to feel the rhythm of how Americans speak and the unique ways they stretch or shorten certain sounds.
Exactly, Alex. A lot of people focus on getting the words right, but neglect those subtleties that make a huge difference. We'll dive deep into the techniques that can accelerate your progress. We'll cover everything from mastering vowel shifts, understanding regional differences, to even psychological barriers like confidence. By the end of this conversation, you'll have a toolkit full of tips and exercises to really hone that American accent.
And the best part is, these techniques aren't just for people living in the US. Thanks to technology, you can practice your accent from anywhere in the world. The key is knowing what to focus on and being consistent. So, if you're ready to work on sounding more American, grab a notebook and let's get started.
All right, Alex, let's jump right in. When it comes to perfecting an American accent quickly, what do you think is the first thing people should focus on?
The first thing? Without a doubt, vowel sounds. American English has some very distinct vowel shifts that set it apart from other varieties of English. For example, in the US, we have something called the caught merger in some areas, but not others. You'll hear some people pronounce those two words the same and others with a slight difference.
That's a great point. And vowel sounds really are the foundation. In some accents, vowels are clipped, meaning they're pronounced more briefly, but in American English, they're often drawn out or diphthongized, which means the sound glides from one vowel to another. A classic example is the word face. In American English, it's more like ice. That glide can really help you sound more native.
Totally. And another key vowel sound that's unique in American English is the schwa, the most common sound in English, believe it or not. It's that unstressed, almost neutral sound you hear in the second syllable of words like banana or sofa.
Oh, yeah, the schwa is a big deal. Americans use it a lot, especially in casual speech. If you can master that sound, it really helps soften your accent and makes your speech sound more natural. A lot of non native speakers tend to stress every syllable, but American English is a lot more relaxed when it comes to pronunciation.
Exactly. It's about letting go of that formality and learning to embrace the flow of the language. I'd even say that a huge part of perfecting your accent is just learning to listen better. There are so many subtleties in how Americans speak, and most people aren't really tuned into that at first.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the best exercises to train your ear is shadowing. Have you heard of that technique?
Yeah, shadowing is awesome. For those who don't know, shadowing is when you listen to a native speaker and then immediately repeat what they're saying, trying to match their intonation, rhythm, and even pauses. It's like being an echo, but you're focusing on getting every detail just right.
Exactly. And the great thing about shadowing is that you're training your brain to recognize and reproduce the natural flow of American speech. It's not just about the words, it's about the music of the language, so to speak.
And you can do this with anything: movies, TV shows, podcasts, YouTube videos. Just pick a native speaker whose accent you like and start shadowing them. It's one of the quickest ways to make noticeable improvements in your accent.
Yes. And let's talk about the importance of consistency. You can't expect to perfect an accent overnight. But if you're practicing a little bit each day, you'll be amazed at how quickly you can improve. Even just 10 minutes a day can make a big difference over a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Consistency is key. It's not enough to do one long session and then forget about it for a week. Your brain needs regular exposure to the sounds and patterns of American English in order to internalize them.
One thing I found helpful is setting small, manageable goals. Maybe one week you focus on improving your vowel sounds. The next week you work on intonation. By breaking it down into bite sized pieces, you're less likely to get overwhelmed and you can track your progress more easily.
Great advice. Speaking of intonation, let's dive into that. Intonation is one of the hardest things for non native speakers to master, but it's also one of the most important. American English has a very specific melody. It tends to rise and fall in certain patterns.
Right? And this is where it gets interesting because American intonation can vary depending on the region or even the social context. But generally, American English has a more relaxed and less rigid intonation compared to British English. For example, we use a lot of upward inflections at the end of sentences, especially in casual speech, which can make statements sound like questions.
Yes, that's called upspeak or high rising terminal. It's really common in some parts of the US, especially on the West Coast, like California. But it's not just about upspeak. Americans also tend to stress different parts of sentences for emphasis. For example, in the sentence, I didn't say he stole the money, depending on which word you stress, you change the entire meaning.
Exactly. Intonation is like the emotional undertone of what you're saying, and it can completely shift how your words are interpreted. If you can master those stress patterns and rises and falls, you'll sound way more natural and confident when speaking.
Another trick that can help is paying attention to how Americans pause. Pauses can seem small, but they really add to the flow of conversation. Americans don't usually rush their sentences, and they like to take little breaths or pauses between ideas. Those pauses help break up speech and make it sound more natural.
That's so true. If you're trying to sound more natural in a conversation, don't be afraid to pause. It can actually help you think through your next sentence and give you time to adjust your pronunciation as you speak.
And speaking of conversational flow, let's touch on the importance of contractions. Americans love using contractions, and it's something that can really make your speech sound more fluid. Instead of saying I cannot, you say I can't. Instead of I am, you say I'm. These little shortcuts go a long way in making you sound more like a native speaker.
Absolutely, contractions are like the glue that holds American speech together. They make sentences shorter and more to the point. I think sometimes non native speakers feel like they have to enunciate every word perfectly. But in American English, that's not usually how we talk. It's more about blending words together and focusing on the overall rhythm.
Yeah, the rhythm is key. Another thing that helps with that is practicing minimal pairs. Do you know about those?
Oh, yeah, minimal pairs are a fantastic tool for honing in on specific sounds. For those who don't know, minimal pairs are pairs of words that only differ by one sound, like ship and sheep, or bet and bat. Practicing these can really help you fine tune your pronunciation because you're focusing on that one tiny difference.
Exactly, and those small differences can make a big impact. If someone mispronounces a vowel sound, it can change the meaning of the word entirely. So practicing minimal pairs can help you zero in on those tricky sounds and really master them.
And while we're talking about specific sounds, let's mention the American R sound. It's one of the hardest sounds for people to get right because in some accents, like British or Australian, the R is more subtle or even dropped entirely in certain words. But in American English, the R is much more pronounced, especially at the end of words like car or mother.
Oh yeah, the American R is a beast. It's a bit more of a tongue workout, but once you get the hang of it, it makes a huge difference in your accent. A good way to practice is by exaggerating the R sound at first, almost overpronouncing it, and then gradually dialing it back to a more natural level.
That's a great strategy. It's like a muscle. Once you train it enough, it becomes second nature. And speaking of training, let's not forget about tongue twisters. They might seem silly, but they're actually really effective for improving pronunciation. Something like red leather, yellow leather, or she sells seashells helps you practice those tricky consonant combinations and improve your articulation.
Yes, I love tongue twisters for that reason. They force you to slow down and really pay attention to how your mouth and tongue are moving. Plus, they're fun. It doesn't always have to be serious. You can have a good time while you're practicing your accent.
I love that. Practice makes progress. It's such a key mindset to have. Now that we've covered a lot of the foundational techniques, Alex, should we talk about some specific tools or resources that can help people accelerate their progress even further?
Definitely. There are so many great tools out there nowadays, especially with all the apps and online resources. Let's start with one of my favorites, speech recognition software. A lot of language learning apps now have built-in speech recognition that gives you feedback on your pronunciation. Apps like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone are really helpful because they analyze how close your accent is to a native speaker's.
Yeah, I've tried those, and they're fantastic because they give instant feedback. Sometimes it's hard to tell on your own if you're pronouncing something correctly, but these apps can break down where you're going wrong. And it's great because you can use them whenever you have a few minutes of free time.
Exactly. And there's also Youglish. Have you used that one?
Oh, yes, I love Youglish. For those who haven't heard of it, it's basically a search engine for pronunciation. You type in any word or phrase, and it pulls up video clips of native speakers using that word in different contexts. It's an awesome way to hear how words are pronounced naturally in conversation. Plus, you can choose the American accent specifically if that's what you're focusing on.
That's a great one, especially if you're having trouble with a particular word or phrase. Hearing it used in different sentences really helps cement it in your mind. Another resource that's often overlooked is audiobooks. If you can find a narrator with a strong American accent, listening to audiobooks can really immerse you in the sound and rhythm of the language.
Yes. And the cool thing with audiobooks is that you can combine listening with reading if you're following along with the text. It helps reinforce the connection between what you hear and how the words look on the page, which is important for understanding the relationship between spelling and pronunciation in American English.
Right, and that brings me to another tip, using transcripts with your listening practice. If you're watching YouTube videos, interviews, or podcasts, try to find ones with transcripts or subtitles. It's like giving your brain two ways to absorb the language at once. You see the text and hear the pronunciation at the same time.
That's such a good point, Alex. It's all about maximizing your exposure to the language in different ways. Another thing I want to touch on is speaking practice with real people. No matter how much you practice on your own, nothing beats speaking with native speakers. There are platforms like Italki or Tandem where you can connect with language partners or tutors and have real conversations.
Yes, getting real-time feedback from native speakers is invaluable. You can practice everything we've talked about, intonation, vowel shifts, contractions, while also improving your fluency and getting used to how conversations flow naturally. Plus, having someone point out little mistakes in real time helps you correct them before they become bad habits.
Totally agree. And here's another pro tip: record yourself. It might feel awkward at first, but recording yourself speaking and then listening back is one of the best ways to notice the areas where you're not quite hitting the American accent. You can even compare your recording to a native speaker and see where you need to improve.
Oh yeah, that's such an underrated technique. It really helps you identify those subtle differences between how you think you sound and how you actually sound. It's also a great way to track your progress over time.
Exactly. And let's not forget about mimicking. If you have a favorite American actor or TV show, try mimicking their speech. Find clips where they're speaking clearly and imitate them as closely as possible. It's like a more fun version of shadowing, and it really helps with nailing down the natural flow of American speech.
Oh, that's a great one. Mimicking characters in movies or TV shows is not only effective, but it's also fun, which keeps you motivated. You can even pick characters who have the accent you're trying to achieve, whether it's a general American accent or a specific regional one.
Speaking of regional accents, I think it's important to mention that the US has a lot of different accents. While most learners aim for a neutral American accent, it can be fun and useful to familiarize yourself with different regional variations, like the Southern accent or the New York accent.
That's true. Even though you might not need to master a specific regional accent, being able to recognize the differences helps with understanding native speakers from different parts of the US Plus. If you're ever interested in acting or voice work, it can give you more versatility.
Exactly. And once you have the basics of the American accent down, experimenting with regional variations can add another layer of authenticity to your speech. But even if you stick to the neutral accent, having that awareness is key.
So true. And let's not forget to mention the importance of patience in this process. A lot of people want instant results, but perfecting an accent takes time. You're reprogramming your mouth, tongue, and even your brain to produce sounds differently. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. You've got to be patient and keep celebrating small victories along the way. Like when you finally nail a tricky vowel sound or catch yourself using a perfect intonation in a conversation, it's those little moments that show you're making progress.
Yes. And remember, perfection isn't always the goal. The key is to be understood and to feel confident when you're speaking. As long as you're working on improving and you're able to communicate effectively, you're already winning.
I couldn't agree more. So, to wrap up, whether you're using apps, practicing with native speakers, or mimicking your favorite TV characters, the most important thing is to stay consistent and enjoy the process. Mastering an accent takes time, but with the right strategies, you can make progress faster than you think.
Definitely. So get out there, start practicing, and most importantly, have fun with it. Thanks for tuning in again, everyone. We'll catch you next time with more tips and tricks for language learning and beyond.
So, Alex, I was thinking maybe we should dive a bit deeper into the mental aspect of accent training. You know, like the psychological barriers people face when they're learning to speak with a new accent. A lot of people I've talked to feel super self conscious, like they're afraid of sounding silly or that they'll be judged.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. I think we don't talk enough about how much confidence and mindset play a role in mastering an accent. It's so common for people to feel like they'll never sound right, and that self doubt can really hold them back. But honestly, it's all about embracing the process and not being afraid to sound imperfect at first.
Exactly. I always tell people to lean into that discomfort. It's okay if you don't sound exactly like a native speaker from the start. In fact, most people don't. I mean, think about how long it takes even kids to fully develop their speech patterns. Accents are a natural part of language learning, and you have to be okay with being a beginner for a while.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of making mistakes when learning an accent. If you're too afraid to speak out loud because you're worried about mispronouncing something or getting the intonation wrong, you'll never get past that hurdle. Making mistakes is literally part of the learning process.
Totally. It's like how babies learn to speak. They babble, they make sounds, and they're definitely not worried about being judged. But they improve because they keep trying. As adults, we tend to overthink it. But if you adopt that childlike approach, where you're just playing with the language and experimenting, it takes a lot of pressure off.
Exactly. And I think one of the best things you can do is to surround yourself with positive reinforcement. Find a supportive community or a language partner who encourages you rather than making you feel self conscious. Because if you're constantly worried about what others think, it's going to slow down your progress.
Yeah, finding people who are patient and encouraging can make a world of difference. Whether it's a tutor, a language exchange partner, or even just a friend who's willing to listen while you practice, having that support system can really boost your confidence.
And on top of that, I think it's crucial to celebrate your small wins. Like, maybe you've been struggling with the American R sound for a while. But today, you finally nailed it. That's something to be proud of. Those little victories are what keep you motivated to keep going.
Yes, I love that. Focusing on what you can do instead of what you haven't perfected yet really shifts your mindset. It makes the whole process feel less daunting.
Exactly. And let's be real, even native speakers don't have perfect accents all the time. We all have moments where we stumble over words, or our intonation is off because we're tired or distracted. So aiming for perfection isn't necessary. What matters is being understood and feeling comfortable when you speak.
Right. And I think it's important to mention that some people actually prefer to keep their accent, or at least elements of it, as part of their identity. You don't have to completely erase your original accent to speak confidently in American English. You can mix elements of both and still be understood perfectly. Your accent is part of who you are, and there's no reason to feel like you have to hide it.
That's such a good point, Sarah. We've been talking a lot about how to sound more American, but there's definitely value in maintaining parts of your own accent if that's what you want. Some people find that balance between sounding clear and natural while still keeping a bit of their own flavor in the way they speak.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance. If you're learning an American accent because it's practical for work or social situations, that's great. But if you also want to maintain a part of your original accent because it's important to you culturally or personally, that's just as valid. The goal is to communicate clearly, not to erase who you are.
I love that. It's a reminder that language is fluid and personal. And speaking of being yourself, I think there's another psychological aspect to mastering an accent: imposter syndrome. You know, that feeling like you're faking it when you speak with a new accent. Have you come across that?
Oh, definitely. I think it happens to a lot of people when they're trying to adopt a new way of speaking. They feel like they're not being authentic or that they're pretending to be someone they're not. But the truth is, language is all about adapting to different contexts. You're not faking anything, you're just adjusting to the situation.
Exactly. And I think understanding that language is flexible helps take the pressure off. Just because you're speaking with a different accent doesn't mean you're not being true to yourself. It's just another skill you're developing, like learning how to write in a formal style versus an informal one.
Totally. And I think once people start seeing their accent as a tool they can use depending on the situation, it becomes less about faking and more about effective communication. Like, if you're in a professional setting and need to sound more polished or neutral, that's a choice you're making to communicate more clearly. It doesn't take away from who you are.
Yes, and that mindset shift is crucial. You're not pretending, you're just enhancing your communication skills. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, you won't even think about it. You'll just switch accents depending on the situation, like flipping a switch.
Exactly. And with enough practice, the American accent will feel like just another tool in your language toolkit. You'll be able to switch between accents with ease, and that's such a powerful skill to have.
Absolutely. So, whether you're working on perfecting an American accent quickly for professional reasons or just for fun, the key takeaway is to enjoy the process. Don't rush it. Don't aim for perfection right away. And most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, have fun with it. And remember, it's not about becoming someone else. It's about learning a new way to communicate and express yourself. Whether you're blending accents, mastering that American twang, or just experimenting with different sounds, you're adding more layers to your language skills.
Exactly. It's all about growth, not perfection. So keep practicing, keep experimenting, and before you know it, that American accent will feel like second nature.
Some common questions and answers related to the topic: how to perfect your USA accent really fast.
How long does it take to develop an American accent?
The time it takes to develop an American accent varies depending on your starting point, language background, and how much time you dedicate to practice. With daily practice and focused techniques, you can see noticeable improvements within a few months. However, perfecting it may take longer. Consistency is key, and some people progress faster if they already have a strong understanding of English pronunciation.
What are the key differences between a British and an American accent?
Some of the main differences between British and American accents are vowels. Americans tend to pronounce vowels more openly and with a different tone, especially with sounds like the A in words like cat, more nasally, and the O in words like hot, a more rounded sound in American English. R sounds. American accents are rhotic, meaning the R is pronounced clearly in all positions, e.g., car, water, whereas many British accents, especially RP, received pronunciation, drop the R sound at the end of words, T sounds. In American English, the T sound often becomes a flap, sounding more like a soft D in words like water or better. Intonation. American intonation tends to be more monotone compared to British English, which often has a more varied musical rhythm.
What's the best way to improve my American accent quickly?
To improve your American accent quickly, focus on vowel and consonant sounds. Master key. Vowel shifts like the long A sound and the rhotic R. Practice shadowing, listen to native speakers, and try to mimic their speech patterns immediately, repeating the rhythm and intonation of their sentences. Use speech recognition apps. Tools like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone can provide immediate feedback on your pronunciation. Engage in speaking practice. Record yourself or speak with native speakers regularly to improve your fluency and catch subtle errors. Watch American media. Exposure to American films, podcasts, and YouTube channels can help you pick up on natural expressions and pronunciation.
Is it possible to learn a specific regional American accent like Southern or New York?
Yes, with focused practice, it's possible to learn a specific regional accent. Each region in the US has unique vowel sounds, intonation, and even vocabulary. For example, the Southern accent has a slower drawl and elongated vowels, while a New York accent has sharper consonants and unique vowel shifts. Resources like Youglish or watching local media from that region can help you immerse yourself in that specific accent.
Should I aim for a neutral American accent or focus on a regional one?
It depends on your goals. Most people learning an American accent for work or social reasons aim for a neutral accent, also known as General American, because it's widely understood across the US and lacks strong regional traits. However, if you have a personal interest in a regional accent or need it for acting, it can be fun and useful to focus on a specific area, like a Southern or Midwestern accent.
What role does intonation play in an American accent?
Intonation, the rise and fall of pitch while speaking, plays a big role in sounding natural. American intonation tends to have a more flat or downward pitch, especially at the end of sentences. For example, in yes no questions, Americans often raise their pitch slightly at the end, but it's usually less dramatic than in other English dialects like Australian or British. Focusing on this subtle rhythm can help you sound more fluent and natural.
What are some common mistakes learners make when trying to develop an American accent?
Some common mistakes include overpronouncing sounds. Trying too hard to emphasize every syllable can make speech sound unnatural. Remember that Americans tend to shorten and blend certain sounds, ignoring contractions. Americans use a lot of contractions in everyday speech, e.g., I'm, your, they've. Not using them can make your speech sound overly formal. Skipping intonation practice, focusing only on individual sounds without considering the flow and melody of sentences, can result in sounding robotic. Not practicing regularly. Sporadic practice won't yield fast results. Daily practice, even for just 10 to 15 minutes, can make a huge difference.
Can listening to American music or movies help improve my accent?
Yes, immersing yourself in American music, movies, podcasts, and TV shows can help you get familiar with how Americans speak naturally. Pay attention to how words are pronounced, the rhythm of sentences, and common phrases. You can even practice singing along or mimicking lines from movies to improve your pronunciation and intonation.
How can I reduce my native accent while speaking American English?
To reduce the influence of your native accent, work on pronunciation drills, focus on the sounds that are the most different between your native language and American English. Minimal pair exercises, words that differ by only one sound, like bit and beat, can help. Slow down. Speaking more slowly can help you focus on correct pronunciation without slipping back into your native accent. Record yourself. Listening back to your recordings will help you notice patterns where your native accent comes through. Compare them to native speakers and adjust accordingly. Practice with a tutor. A native speaking tutor can provide personalized feedback on areas where your native accent is more prominent.
How important is tongue placement when developing an American accent?
Tongue placement is crucial in perfecting an accent. Many vowel and consonant sounds in American English require specific tongue positions. For example, the American R sound requires the tongue to be pulled back slightly, and it's not as rolled or tapped as in other languages. Mastering tongue placement can significantly improve your pronunciation.
Is it okay to keep some elements of my original accent while speaking with an American accent?
Absolutely. You don't need to completely erase your original accent unless that's your personal goal. Many people blend their original accent with elements of an American accent, which can make their speech unique while still being easily understood. As long as you're communicating clearly, there's no right or wrong way to speak. Your accent is part of your identity, and it's okay to retain some of that while adapting to a new one.
Can I learn an American accent without a tutor?
Yes, you can learn an American accent without a tutor, but it might take more time and self discipline. Using online resources like YouTube tutorials, language apps, and speech practice tools can be incredibly helpful. However, a tutor can offer personalized feedback and corrections that speed up the process. If you don't have access to a tutor, recording your speech and comparing it with native speakers, practicing with friends, and using apps that provide pronunciation feedback can still help you improve significantly.
How often should I practice to develop an American accent quickly?
For fast improvement, it's important to practice consistently. Aim for at least 30 minutes of focused practice every day. This could include listening to native speakers, practicing pronunciation drills, shadowing, imitating dialogues from movies or TV shows, and recording your speech for self assessment. Regular exposure to American English through listening and speaking will reinforce what you learn.
What are some quick exercises to improve my American accent?
Here are a few quick exercises. Minimal pairs. Practice pairs of words that have one different sound, e.g., ship versus sheep, bed versus bad. R. Sound drill. Repeat words with a strong American R. Sound like car, star, girl, and world to practice the rhotic pronunciation. Shadowing exercise. Listen to a short clip of a native speaker and repeat it immediately, trying to match their accent, intonation, and rhythm. Tongue twisters. Try saying American-specific tongue twisters like red leather, yellow leather, or Betty bought a bit of butter to practice fluidity and precision. Vowel elongation. Focus on the American long vowels by exaggerating words like cat, pronounced like kayat, dog, pronounced dog, or bike, pronounced bike.
How can I train my ear to recognize American accents?
Ear training is crucial for mastering an accent. Here's how you can develop it. Listen to podcasts, news, or TV shows. Pay close attention to how native speakers pronounce words and how they form their sentences. Watch movies with subtitles. Try to match the spoken words with the subtitles, noticing the accent and how words are pronounced. Then, rewatch scenes without subtitles to test your comprehension. Use language learning apps. Apps like Youglish or Forvo help you hear different native speakers pronounce words and phrases in American English. This reinforces your ability to distinguish sounds. Practice with dictation exercises. Listen to a short passage and try to write down exactly what you hear. This can help you pick up on subtleties in pronunciation that you might not notice otherwise.
What is shadowing, and how can it help me perfect my accent?
Shadowing is a technique where you listen to native speakers and immediately repeat what they say, copying their pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible. This helps train your ear, mouth, and brain to sync with the patterns of American English. It's a powerful way to develop fluency and a natural sounding accent. You can shadow podcasts, YouTube videos, or movie dialogues. Start with slow, clear speech, then progress to faster, conversational tones.
Are there specific sounds in American English that I should focus on mastering first?
Yes, there are several key sounds in American English that you should focus on. The American R. It's pronounced differently from many other accents. It's a rhotic sound, meaning you'll pronounce the R even at the end of words like car and mother. The flap T. In American English, the T often sounds like a soft D in words like water, better, and city. Long vowels. Practice vowels like in cat, caught, meet, and boot. Americans tend to elongate vowel sounds. The sounds, both the voiced, like in this, and unvoiced, like in think the sounds, can be tricky. Make sure to practice the tongue placement for these sounds.
How important is a muscle memory when learning an accent?
Muscle memory is crucial because your tongue, lips, and vocal cords need to get used to forming sounds that may not exist in your native language. By repeating sounds and words regularly, you train your speech muscles to produce the correct American sounds automatically without thinking about it. Exercises like pronunciation drills and tongue twisters help you build this muscle memory faster, making your accent more natural over time.
How can I improve my American accent if I don't live in the US or have daily interactions with native speakers?
Even if you don't live in the US, you can still immerse yourself in the language. Watch American media, TV shows, movies, YouTube channels, and podcasts expose you to authentic American English daily. Language exchange apps. Use apps like Tandem, HelloTalk, or italki to connect with native speakers for regular conversation practice. Join online communities. Platforms like Reddit or Facebook often have language learning groups where you can practice with other learners or native speakers. Record and analyze your speech. Record yourself speaking or reading aloud. Then compare it with native speakers. This will help you notice areas where you can improve. Virtual accent coaching. You can find online tutors who specialize in American accent training on platforms like Preply or Verbling.
Does accent reduction mean losing my identity or culture?
No, accent reduction is about improving communication, not losing your identity. You don't have to erase your original accent unless you want to. Many people choose to adopt a more neutral American accent for professional reasons or to be better understood, but they still retain elements of their native accent in other contexts. It's about flexibility, not conformity. You can be proud of your cultural heritage while also learning how to speak with an American accent when it's practical or necessary.
Can children learn an American accent faster than adults?
Yes, children typically learn accents more quickly than adults because their brains are more adaptable to new sounds. They can absorb language patterns more naturally, often picking up accents just by being exposed to them. However, adults can still master accents through deliberate practice. It might take a little more conscious effort for adults, but with focused training and consistent practice, it's definitely achievable.